Hey everybody, in this video I'm going to talk about how unreliable, in general, the health influencers are on the internet. Even the people with the best pedigrees, the Harvard degrees, the Stanford degrees, the Oxford degrees, the Dartmouth degrees, the Columbia degrees, the Harvard degrees, did I mention that? More than one Harvard degree I'm going to be talking about here. UCLA, some of the best institutions in the world. People think, oh, therefore these people know what they're talking about. Not necessarily. And most of the time, most online health influencers don't know what they're talking about. Most of the time, people are going straight from the hip. It's more about ego than it is about knowledge. I mean by that most people are more interested in getting their name out there and being known for being somebody who's a leading voice in X, Y, or Z field on social media. But in fact, most of the people who are in that position, who try to be quote unquote leading voices in their field, especially in the area of nutrition and lifestyle, are completely full of shit. They don't know what they're talking about. Most of the time, they don't read the studies carefully that they talk about. Their interpretations and conclusions in the various studies are completely wrong and ridiculous. And in this particular video, I'm going to take a case study of such a thing, and we're going to see how ridiculous, in the case of the time-restricted eating study, many of these influencers are. Now, in the course of talking about the opinions of these different influencers, we're also going to get a deeper understanding of the study itself. So by refuting them and by showing how each of these people are wrong, we're not only going to get a deeper understanding of how misinformation works on social media, but also two other things. The study itself and general principles by which to read and interpret studies. So hopefully you'll take each of those three things away from this video, and your knowledge level will level up. So the five people I'm going to be talking about here are, I think I've got five. It's going to be Nina Teicholz. She's author of Big Fat Surprise. It's a book about why low-carb diets are great and vegetable oils are bad and butter's good. Gary Taubes, author of Good Calories, Bad Calories. A good portion of Nina Teicholz's book plagiarized Good Calories, Bad Calories. So it's essentially much the same story. Jason Fung, who wrote a bunch of code books, like one is called Obesity Code, one's called Diabetes Code, one's called I think he has a cancer code now. He's got a code for every major chronic disease. I'm pretty sure he's just gonna have Alzheimer's and what else has he not gotten at this point? Maybe accidents. He does all the major causes of death, and basically his answer to all of them is insulin. So insulin's the reason all these diseases exist, and he's highly reductionistic and wrong. It's not how these diseases actually work. It's not how the research community works, but he reduces all these diseases to this very simple pathway, and then he claims that everybody who's talking about it in the research community is foolish and is missing the forest for the trees, and is overlooking the obvious, and only he's bringing the real truth, the true obvious truth, so that everybody can now see it's as simple as X, Y, and Z, and you just need to follow his recommendations, and he'll lead you to health nirvana, and that's his shtick, and he's incredibly successful doing it. I think he has 160 followers on Twitter. I don't know if he's active on Instagram, but he's a beast of a health influencer. We'll put it that way. Nick Norwitz, the Dartmouth undergrad, Oxford PhD in 2 years, and now Harvard medical student, and David Ludwig, I think he got his PhD, his MD PhD at Stanford, and then he's a Harvard professor. So, what holds a lot of these people in common? Even Nina, who I think has her journalism degree at Columbia. Gary has, I think, a master's degree in physics or maybe mechanical engineering at Harvard. What holds all these guys together is their incredible and impeccable credentials. But if you just look at what they say on so many different issues, you start to realize these people are unreliable. And it's really important to realize this, because most of the people you're going to be looking at on social media, whenever they're prominent figures on social media, are unreliable in their information that they're giving. Okay, so let's talk about exactly what they're unreliable about, and I'm just gonna have to explain some stuff because it's hilarious. It's so tough. So Nina, in this back and forth with her, and Ethan Weiss, and they think Gary's in the thread, and Ludwig is in the thread. This guy named Larry Huston, who's he writes for Cardio Brief. I don't know who he is, but I guess he's an influential person. So, she says that anecdotes can successfully contradict theories. They can't, but here's why anecdotes can't contradict theories. Because, I actually respond to, I think Gary at some point, I said, an anecdote is not scientific. It's not scientific because its collection is not well controlled and it is unreliable. So the reason an anecdote can't successfully, contradict a theory, it can't overturn, it can't falsify a theory, is because if you don't have a good control of your data and you don't execute the anecdote in a controlled manner to isolate the underlying variable that's causing the outcome in a very systematic and careful manner. And also, if you're just reporting it on the internet, or some random reporting on the internet and there's no documentation, we don't know if you did it right. We don't know if you did it right. Maybe sometimes you don't even know if you did it right. I can ask you questions. Oftentimes most people can't answer the questions that would get at whether or not you controlled the anecdote correctly. And even if you do state that you controlled the anecdote correctly, you could be lying. Having to go through peer review, now it's no guarantee that you're not lying. It's no guarantee that you're not falsifying or submitting fraudulent data. There's a lot of fraudulent data in the peer-reviewed scientific literature. There's no question about it, that there's a huge amount of fraudulent data. It's data that people make up, or they manipulate in some way or another, or they, through wishful thinking, do an experiment a certain way and sort of like turn a blind eye to other potential interpretations and only present their particular favored interpretation without giving the full picture of what they actually found. There's many ways to present data in such a way that it's very misleading and fraudulent, essentially, and in some cases blatantly fraudulent. So peer review doesn't totally protect from that. Peer review is one mechanism by which you can increase the quality. Now, it's not a great mechanism all the time, as I said, but it is one mechanism. And especially if you're transparent about your data, you show the raw data, you submit the raw data to the journal. That's published as well, time-stamped, and there's a bunch of other mechanisms by which you can then increase the reliability and the legitimacy and the trustworthiness of the data. And I think this should be the future of biomedical science. But you don't do that with an anecdote. You've lost all of that control with an anecdote. So, yeah. And then, let's say, for example, fasting, for example. It's a great example because we're talking about fasting in this particular thread. With fasting, let's say I just restrict my eating window, from 4 o'clock to 8 o'clock p.m., and the rest of the day I don't eat at all. Well, you're not controlling every variable you could, even in that case, right? Why? Because you don't know if that shortening of that eating window is the real cause for you to, say, lose 10 pounds, which you might anecdotally report. You don't know if that's the reason that you lost 10 pounds or if it's just simply paying attention to your food and paying attention to how you're eating. That could also cause weight loss. And that study has actually been done. That was done by Ethan Weiss, where he did a very similar kind of study to what I just described, and he saw no difference between intermittent fasting and consistent meal timing. So already you can't really establish causality from the shortening of the eating window from that particular anecdote because you're not controlling all the variables with another control. What you need to do is, with that kind of anecdote, and this would change it from being an anecdote to what's called an N of 1 trial. What you need to do is you need to take a restricted eating window of 4 hours, and then you need to do that for 2 months, and then switch, and then do for another 2 months consistent meal timing where you're focusing on eating at a precise time, but you're not restricting your eating window. Then you isolate the effect. Is it because I'm paying attention to when I'm eating or how I'm eating, or is it because I'm shortening my eating window? Then you're isolating that effect. But with an anecdote by itself, you can't actually know what the effect is from, right? That's why, the way that you do your anecdote, since it's not systematically done in a scientific manner, trying to rule out these different variables, you can't conclude much from it. There's always multiple different interpretations. When there's multiple different interpretations that are equally good, it's not a really good experiment. A good experiment is one where there's one much more plausible interpretation than all the others. Ideally, there's one interpretation that's overwhelmingly more plausible to the degree that which the other ones are ridiculous, or in the best case is there's only one interpretation at all, only one plausible interpretation, and every other interpretation is ludicrous. That's an ideal experiment. But when you have an experiment that produces multiple different interpretations, like 2, 3, 4 different interpretations, and there's more interpretations than the ones I just gave for time-restricted eating, by the way. If you have an experiment that produces multiple interpretations that are equally valid, it's not a good experiment because it's not controlling for the causal variables in such a way that allows you to derive just one interpretation. That's why an anecdote is not good. And to turn an anecdote into science, you can turn it into science by doing these crossovers I just talked about. So you do things one way for 2 months, do things another way for 2 months, and ideally you do an A-B crossover. So let's say I time restrict for 2 months, then I do consistent meal timing for 2 months, then I do time restriction for 2 months, and then consistent meal timing for 2 months. Why do you do it this way? Because there's other confounding variables. This is one of the other interpretations I was just alluding to earlier. One other confounding variable is the fact that life itself throws you curveballs. Your circumstances, your living circumstances, can affect your response to dietary change. So let's say I switch to time-restricted eating, but at the same time, like, my life becomes much less stressful. Suddenly, like, I have a windfall of money, and I'm able to hire a chef. It could just be that the chef is helping me, like, not to eat junk food and all this other stuff. It had nothing to do with the time-restricted eating, and had nothing to do with any of that. It just had to do with I was less stressed, and then my chef helped me to not eat junk food because my chef was making all my stuff, right? And if you don't take that into account, then that can be a totally different interpretation of your time-restricted eating anecdote. But if you do an A-B style, then you see, okay, well, I switched to time-restricted eating, but then I'm going to switch back to consistent meal timing while I still have the chef. And then you start to see, oh, okay, it's actually has nothing to do with the time-restricted eating. It could just have to do with the chef. And then maybe the chef goes away when you switch back to time-restricted eating again, and then you do, like, much worse. And you're like, the chef was responsible. And so the A-B style allows you to isolate that. But in that case, you're not actually doing an anecdote anymore. That's a scientific experiment. So scientific experiments, N of 1 scientific experiments are a real thing, but the vast majority of people who report anecdotes on the internet are not doing N of 1 experiments, like 99.99999%. It's publishable to do an N of 1 experiment. You can publish these in major journals. N of 1s are legit. These are things you can actually overturn theories with. But for anecdotes, you can't. Why? Again, because you're not controlling necessarily all the different causal variables, as I just pointed out just now. That's the first reason. Second reason is that we don't know if you're reliable. And so we need the raw data, all this other stuff. And in the case of anecdotes, the vast majority of the time they're not reliable because there's no transparency for the data. And there's no way to know whether or not you're telling the truth. And again, there's still this problem within published research itself, but this is getting better. And to the degree to which we do make this better, it's going to be way better than anecdotes in that respect as well. Okay? Not just with respect to the causal variables. So that's why an anecdote can't successfully overturn a theory. It's like absurd. So this person is a critical science journalist. She's written books about science, but she doesn't understand how science works. This is like Science 101. Anecdotes cannot successfully overturn theories. It's absurd. She doesn't know what she's talking about. She had a really good editor for her book that made her sound like really smart in her book. But her thinking about science is bad. And so this is one of the great, science communicators today. She's got She's got 120,000 followers on Twitter. So many people trust her, but she's not good. Okay? And then some guy, cardiologist, says it shouldn't be necessary to keep repeating, but anecdotes are not data. He's just saying what I said in a shorter form. And then Gary's like, I too am going to disagree. A definition of data is facts and statistics gathered together for reference or analysis. Hence, an anecdote is a data point. More than one is data. The issue is the limits of interpretation, as with all data. This is so confused and ridiculous. It's like, yeah, it's data, but it's like useless data. And yes, if there's limits to interpretation to the degree which there's multiple different interpretations that are equally plausible, again, it's not a good experiment. It's not an experiment. It's like a bad experiment. You call an anecdote a bad experiment, that's fine, because it's not it's not understanding and controlling for what are the different potential causal variables. It's just like, presenting an experience where there could be so many different things that could explain it. You could call it a bad experiment. I'm okay calling it like that. An anecdote is a bad experiment, unless it becomes a good experiment, in which case it's an N of 1 trial, because you've actually just started to do science. But he says, like, the issue is the limits of interpretation with all data. That's true, but that's trivially true. Data that can be interpreted in multiple different ways, again, is a bad experiment. A good experiment doesn't have multiple interpretations. It's not an anecdote, because an anecdote, once it's a good experiment, is no longer an anecdote. It's a trial. It's an N of 1 trial. I hope this makes sense. Like, this is just ridiculous. Like, these people just want to pretend that their particular anecdotes hold the same weight as science. They don't. They're ridiculous. I believe that's especially the case with Gary. That's my opinion, and his particular anecdotes. Okay, so yeah, I respond with that, and then, oh God, no. Is it? See, this guy's like saying in the evidence pyramid, the level 5 is experiential and non-research evidence. Actually, an anecdote isn't even that, because a case report is not an anecdote. A case report is a systematically evaluated and systematically reported anecdote, right? So in such a way that, like, you're taking into account, here's the different interpretations, here's the ways we could be wrong, blah, 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 blah. And a good case study is one where you do some N of 1 experimentation. So actually, even an anecdote is not level 5 evidence. It's not scientific evidence, period. End of story. Giannis Zachariades. Okay. Let's get to 2 other interpretations before we end on the Jason Fung, because Jason Fung's funny. And by the way, Jason, if you're watching this video, don't have what is her name, Megan Ramos. Don't have Megan Ramos come harass me. I know that she harassed what was his name, Alistair McAlpine, and she almost got him kicked out because he said some mean things. I think that if you're listening, Jason, I think your stuff is terrible, but I'm not going to give you grounds to harass me, so please don't. I'm just going to critique you scientifically. So for the record, my friend, I call you like a quack. It's just an opinion, but I'm going to critique you scientifically. We're going to focus on that, because for the purposes of this video, you're not a quack. Like, it's just you made a bad thread. Okay, so Nick, we're going to skip over you, Jason. We're going to go to Nick Norwitz and Dr. Ludwig, because these are some terrible takes. So again, I'm talking about this calorie restriction versus calorie restriction plus time restricted feeding study, and here's a really just a terrible take on the study that a lot of people have, but I'm going to go preempt it real quick with by looking at this graph. So there's this graph for people who are listening and not watching the video of the daily calorie restriction group versus the time restricted eating plus daily calorie restriction group, and you can see the 2 bars, and they're going down pretty rapidly, pretty steadily. There's like almost a 0 difference between the 2, even at month 1. Like, it looks like more of a difference because they're offset, right? But if you actually put them both on the 1 month mark, they would actually be, which they are, I think they're both on the 1 month mark. Maybe that's just the design of the study. That's interesting. That's interesting. Oh, yeah, that's interesting. Okay, I'm arguing with myself now. Okay, but they're both steadily going down, and at about the 6th month mark, at the 7th month mark, the lines crisscross at about 9 kilograms weight loss, right? Both groups are about 9 kilograms weight loss. They crisscross, and in fact, the daily calorie restriction study has a marginally greater weight loss than the time restricted eating study, group. Marginally greater weight loss, okay? And then they crisscross again, and they're at the same exact amount of weight loss. At 8 months, they go down again, where the daily calorie restriction study is a little bit lower. Again, they're going a little bit up. Both of them were at 10 months. They're marginally different, maybe like 1.1 kilograms, like a cup of water difference. Like one group drank a cup of water, one didn't. Less than that, right? Less than a cup of water, less than a glass of water. And then they go to 11 months, and they're the exact same. So they're crisscrossing. They're virtually identical from 7 to 11 months. And then at 12 months, the daily calorie restriction group goes up substantially, and the time restricted eating group doesn't. Okay, so there's this marginal difference of about 1 kilogram. I think it ends up being, I want to say it ends up being like 1.8 kilograms difference? It doesn't even look like that on the graph. Yeah, I mean, I guess it's like a 1.8 kilogram difference, if I remember correctly. Okay, let's double check. Yeah, it's a 1.8 kilogram difference at 12 months. okay? But if you look at all the other points from 7 to 11 months, they're exactly the same. Suggesting that this 1.8 kilogram difference at 12 months is just a fluke. For whatever random reason, the daily calorie restriction group lost a little bit more of its weight loss than the time restricted eating group, but that was not the case throughout the entire length of the study, up to about 6 months, from 6 months thereafter, suggesting it's just a fluke that this happened. Yet nonetheless, this fluke, which is not statistically significant, which should be an indicator here, man. Nick Norwitz, again, this Harvard medical student who got his PhD in 2 years. I think anybody who gets their PhD in 2 years, he's either a super genius or he got through quickly. This was during coronavirus, so my understanding is they let him through quickly because coronavirus was messing things up, so they just wanted to get him out. So he's a 2-year PhD. I don't know what that means. Whenever I read his stuff, whenever I read stuff like this, it's like, how could he, as a PhD, write this? But he says, headline should have been, quote, in the context of calorie restriction in a mixed diet, TRF only provides across-the-board trending benefits versus calorie restriction without statistical significance on metrics primarily related to weight loss. But people probably wouldn't read that magazine. Again, we're gonna go back to the graph. There's crisscrossing of the lines from month 7 all the way to 12, and there's kind of a fluke increase in the daily calorie restriction group, suggesting that there is a slight difference across weight loss metrics, and that will affect these metrics. Yeah, true, fair enough, it's fine. That's true, that's all true. But, and this is super important, this is a fluke. This appears to be a fluke if you look at the actual time trend data. And I don't know if he actually did that. So it's sad. It's like he doesn't know what he's talking about. I don't think he actually has looked at the time trend data. I don't think he's actually looked at this paper carefully, but he's pontificating to his like 20,000 followers about this. And he's like got a PhD at Oxford and he's a Harvard medical student. Like, is the truth, if he's like that high up there, is the truth important to this guy? I don't think so. I don't think he's really being meticulous about the way he's reading these research studies. And I think this is most of the people on social media. Here's what David Ludwig says. He says, time restricted eating does seem popular among low-carb diet consumers. Again, agree, hypothesis is untested. An aside, TRE in New England Journal of Medicine trial showed numerical benefits for most outcomes. As the editorial said, a clinically meaningful effect can't be excluded from available data. Again, I just debunked that. Like, if you look at the time trend data, the take of both Nick and David is ridiculous. And I said this, and then David didn't even respond. I said it. I didn't even respond. David didn't even respond. And now I'm actually, before I go on to Jason, I want to talk about some of the stuff that Nina said, because I just was reminded of this. She says, to me, the headline is time restricted feeding doesn't work on a low-calorie diet. Qualifier is key here and should have been highlighted in the New York Times study. Successful TRF, I know anecdotally, are people on low-carb, non-calorie restricted diets where fuel source is not glucose, a different metabolic state. Oh my God. And then she says, I'm not an expert, but nearly all my observations are that time-restricted feeding works for people on low-carb, non-calorie restricted diets. So if I were designing a test, that would be one arm. Still an open question. What you've shown is that TRF doesn't work on calorie restricted diets. Yeah, okay, so my response to this is yes, you're absolutely right. We should run a TRF study with people only on low carb who are not in calorie restricted low carb and then one group with non-calorie restricted low carb and the other group with non-calorie restricted low carb plus TRF. And you know why we need to run this study? We need to run this study because just to maximize the public health impact of these randomized controlled trials on which we spend millions of dollars. Because, yeah, that's going to be really relevant to the general population who, I guess everybody's eating low-carb diets, and we really need to test that. The point is this is so niche, and there's so few people who are actually going to be on low-carb and TRF that there's no public health relevance. If you guys know what Don Quixote is, it's this guy who I want to say drank too much or didn't drink enough, something happened. I don't remember in the Spanish, I remember reading it in the Spanish, his brain dried up. That was a really remarkable and memorable quote. His brain dried up. He started to go insane. I think he was isolated, and he started believing he was a knight going on a quest. And this is the 18th century where there's no knights left over. And then he started trying to fence with windmills. And then so that's where the phrase tilting at windmills comes from, meaning she's now tilting at windmills. She's now basically like going on this foolish quest of thinking she's gonna like change the world through low carb. It's like there's no public health relevance of what she's talking about. Her study is so niche and so dedicated to such a small portion of the online internet and all that there's no relevance of any kind of study she would design where it's like low carb and TRF. Like nobody does that. Nobody cares. It's not going to impact public health. It's not going to help people because that's never going to be the way people are eating. So yeah, maybe she's right, but she's just like, she's not right. But maybe, okay, let's assume she could be right. It's still an absurd proposition because it's like she lives in another universe where like pigs fly and everybody's going to be on low carb and everybody's going to want to do TRF. It's like, it's not relevant. Whereas calorie restricted studies versus like freaking, chronic calorie restriction versus, TRF is a good idea. Plus, the other thing is, it's like, why would you think it's a different metabolic state? Most of the TRF studies have not been done in low carbers. Most of the reason we do these TRF studies have nothing to do with low carb. She's actually wrong. Like, most TRF is not in low carb. It's in like obese people who are eating a standard American diet in a non-calorie restricted state and not on low carb. So, like, why does she even think that in the first place? It's only going to work in low carb? Probably because she just like has this belief for no good reason. Okay, anyway, I just wanted to poke fun of her a little bit about that. What else? There was some other thing somebody said that was funny. Yeah, just Ethan pointed out he had his own anecdote where he went off went off TRF after he conducted his own study. He didn't notice any change in weight. And this is the same thing that happened with me. I didn't notice any change in weight. I don't notice any difference in body fat when I do time-restricted feed eating versus not. So there's one anecdote, there's another anecdote, So which anecdotes do we take to be true? We need science for that. Cool. Let's finish with Jason Fung, his hilarious thread. Oh. He continued the thread. So I haven't actually read the full thread yet, so I'm going to read it live to you guys, and hopefully I'm prepared. If I'm not, I'll delete the video and hide in shame. He says, fasting has no benefits. My thoughts. Fung at Substack.substack.com, blah, 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 blah. The study inspired the New York Times to proclaim that time-restricted eating has no benefits. No with a capital N-O benefits. Is it true? Hardly. At 6 months, the TRE group had increased weight loss of 0.5 kilograms, and at 12 months, at 1.8 kilograms, which is not statistically significant. In this study, a negative study, you need to look at the power of the study. Power of the study was a 90% chance. It's a 90% power of detecting a difference of 2.5 kilograms with a two-tailed p-value of 0.025. It's pretty good. Okay, but whatever. He says, the authors concluded that they needed to show a 2.5 additional weight loss for the study to be positive. The intervention increased fasting time from 13.8 hours to 16 hours. It's an increase. That's not true. That's a 16% increase. It's more than that. It's like from 16 hours to 13.3, but it's fine. It's whatever. It's like a slight difference, whatever. Right, a 16% increase in fasting time for a 40% increase in weight loss. That's not happening. Anyone with clinical experience in weight loss knows that. How would you know that with clinical experience? It's a 40% increase in weight loss. This is ridiculous. What if it was only like a 2.5 kilogram additional weight loss on top of 1 kilogram? That would be like that's weird, man. That doesn't even make any sense. So like if you had a 1 kilogram weight loss between the two groups, like each group had a 1 kilogram weight loss, and then like another group, like from calorie restriction and then time restricted eating was expected to produce another 2.5 kilograms, then you'd expect, that's like a 150% increase in weight loss. So actually the less weight loss due to calorie restriction, the more the percent increase in weight loss needed from time restricted eating. But that doesn't make sense because the more weight loss from calorie restriction, probably you'd expect less weight loss from time restricted eating because it's just so much harder for each progressive amount of weight loss to produce more weight loss. So the way that his statistics work is like, if you had 0% from calorie restriction and it's all from TRF, time restricted feeding, then you'd have like an infinite amount more weight loss. And he's like a 16% increase, but actually, and a 16% increase in the fasting window. He's like, how would that cause an infinite amount of increase in weight loss? Well, I mean, that would be much more likely than like if you had a 10 kilogram weight loss and then 2.5 kilograms on top of that, because it's harder to lose additional weight. And yet it would be like a 25% increase in weight loss in the latter case, meaning 10 kilograms plus 2.5. So it's like a smaller number. What if you had a 20 kilogram weight loss or a 25 kilogram weight loss and then 2.5 on top? That's only a 10% increase in weight loss. Yet would that become more plausible with a fasting time of 13 to 16 hours? That doesn't make any sense. It's totally, his argument's illogical. He's just using numbers in a way that like seems to make sense, but if you actually like pick them apart with it by using edge cases, like it's a nonsensical argument. This is what Fung does. And I'm just spitballing here. It's like, it's pretty obvious to me. It's like, okay, whatever. So he says, instead the study showed a 28% increase in weight loss. That's actually pretty damned good, that the conclusion should be that the study is just underpowered. No, the study was powered. Look, friends, I just can't handle it. He says, assuming an anticipated dropout rate of 20%, we estimated the enrollment target of 138 participants would provide the trial with greater than 90% statistical power to detect a significant difference of 2.5 kilograms body weight between the time restricted eating group and the daily calorie restricted group at a significance level of 0.025 using a two-tailed test. So it's powered correctly, friend. It's just like, and then your argument about these percentages is nonsensical. I don't even know how to. It like sounds good because there's numbers, but like if you actually pick apart what the numbers mean, it doesn't make any sense. Like the way he's using the numbers don't make sense. It's like he made this up. And then he's concluding based on the degree of the percentages that there's a statistical power problem, but like he's not doing any sort of statistics to show that. He's just like looking at these different percentages like, oh, it's underpowered. Like he actually hasn't used any statistical methods to show that. He's just like, he's using numbers inappropriately in the first place, and then he's like not using proper statistical methods to determine whether it's underpowered. I don't even think he knows what underpowered is. I don't even think he understands that. I think he's just like saying, like writing crap. He doesn't know what he's talking about. That's what I think. This is my belief, and I believe most scientists would agree with me. 99.9. I believe all statisticians in the world would agree with me. I'm 100% certain of that. So if you're a statistician and you're seeing this and you think I'm wrong, like a real statistician, you need to like be a real person, like a real name, have a real faculty page somewhere. And if you think I'm wrong, go tell me I'm wrong. I would love to hear. But to everybody else, look at the comments of the video, see if there's anybody who says that. And then here's another way to do it, because I could be deleting the comments. So on Twitter, hashtag Kevin is wrong. Kevin Fung wrong. Hashtag Kevin Fung wrong. And then the statistician who thinks I'm wrong can type it out. Go do that. Go look for that on Twitter and see if anybody types it, because I can't delete that on Twitter. Go see if anybody types that and shows that I'm wrong on Twitter and argues that. And then you won't find a single person. I can tell you ahead of time, you're not going to find a single person who says I'm wrong, because this is a absurd analysis. But go do that to verify, to confirm. Any statisticians, your job is to check me. Go please make that tweet, Kevin Fung wrong. Hashtag Kevin Fung wrong. And make that tweet explaining how I'm wrong here and how Jason Fung isn't just making things up. Cool, okay. All right, I'm expecting it. All right. He says, were there any risks? No, not really. Lean mass decreased slightly, but there's definitely no concern about burning muscles as others have seen. Yeah, others had seen a decrease in muscle mass. Yeah, Ethan Weiss's study. So it's so hilarious. It's like, no, there's no concern with an decrease in muscle mass because this study didn't find it. It's like, okay, well, this study didn't find it. That doesn't mean there's not of concern. There's multiple studies in intermittent fasting that show concern with decreased muscle mass versus calorie restriction. And then he says, does this justify the New York Times breathless proclamation that fasting has no benefits? Hardly. Here are 10 important benefits. I can't read this. I can't read this. It's going to take too long. It's like he posted this from his blog. A risk versus benefit analysis. Clearly on the side of benefit, fasting and TRE are simply tools for weight loss. Yes, there's a lot of benefits that may accrue from calorie restriction, but so what? If it works, why not do it? how do you know it's like a clear necessary benefit? Like, what's the risk? What's the harm? The harm is like you're not eating dinner and stuff, or you're not eating breakfast, and you have to like overhaul your life and be irritable during that period. At least I've been, whenever I did time restricted eating, and then you can't go out and go to dinners and stuff professionally because you're not following your diet. There are downsides to this, and if the amount of weight loss is like 1.8 kilograms over the course of 12 months for eliminating a whole meal, non-statistically significant, probably a fluke. It's probably a fluke of statistics. It's not even statistically significant either. Like, what is it worth it? Hell no. Like, he says clearly on the side of benefit. How can you determine that from this study, Matt? He's just like making stuff up. He's like, what is the alternative? Just tell people to cut calories. That's been the standard advice for 50 years, and the success rate close to zero. If that's what academics are crying about, then I can see why you have an obesity epidemic. Yeah, that's bullshit. The alternative is semaglutide. And I'm going to do a video about that soon. The alternative is semaglutide, my friends, which is going to produce way more weight loss than this, more than 10% weight loss. And then plus amylin agonists. Game over. 20% weight loss versus what? Like 1% weight loss? Versus like what? Like 0% weight loss, which is what we got here? What's the alternative? 0% weight loss versus what? Why are academics crying about this? Crowing. Why are they crowing? It's because this is bullshit. This is bullshit. There's no evidence that fasting works. The evidence shows fasting doesn't work here. We have an obesity epidemic partly because people like this guy put his energy into spreading misinformation and confusing people about what the science of obesity actually says, so we can't actually come to a public consensus about obesity, which is the problem with misinformation. Why am I doing this video series? Why am I doing all these videos? Why did I get into obesity in the first place? Why am I talking about this? The reason is I wanted to help solve the obesity epidemic. But then I ran into guys like this and I realized, oh shit, we can't solve the obesity epidemic until we solve the misinformation epidemic. Why? Because until we have consensus in the public about what the science actually says, we can't follow the science. And if we can't follow the science, or you can't have a consensus, we can't create policy because everybody's going to be arguing all the time and confused. So once we have consensus among people about what the truth is, then we can create policy much more easily because we have public support for it. This guy's undermining that. This guy's destroying the possibility of public support for a good obesity policy. So the problem is really with guys like him who are overhyping a study that clearly shows that intermittent fasting doesn't work, time restricted eating doesn't work. He's clearly showing it. And then he's doing it in order to pimp his business, which makes a lot of money. And hopefully he doesn't have Megan Ramos come after me. Please, Megan, don't come harass me at my school. Please, I'm just scientifically criticizing this guy. Your boss is not good. He's not a good dude. This is not good. This is not good science the way he's doing this. This is misinformation. He should be giving people semaglutide in his practice. If you're one of Jason Fung's patients, you should ask for semaglutide. That's going to be standard of care if it's not already standard of care for obesity. It's not fasting. Fasting is nonsense. Go take semaglutide. You're going to be much better hands. People who give semaglutide to somebody like Spencer Nadolsky, send a message to Spencer Nadolsky if you're one of Jason Fung's patients. All right, cool. Hope you guys liked the video. And like, click, subscribe. Share it. Let people know how good this stuff is. Check out my Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Kevin Bass, 2 N's, KevinNBass. Same thing with Patreon. Become a Patreon follower, and then you too can ask me questions on every month on the phone, or send me messages over Twitter. If you are a Patreon follower, subscriber, make sure to send me my messages through Twitter or Instagram. It's much more easy for me to get a hold of you because I'm always swamped with work and I can't always respond to every message. And let me know that you're a Patreon subscriber in the meantime. Also, check out my website at thedietwars.com. You can also check out thedietwars.com/support-me. Check out my podcast at at the Kevin Bass Show. That's on, especially on Apple Podcasts. Write a review on Apple Podcasts because I have 2 reviews now, one by Max Lugavere and one by a person who hated me, who said he wanted to delete his podcast as soon as he downloaded it after 2 minutes because I ramble and I sound like I'm on cocaine. Please write another review so that kind of gets nudged out over time. And then rate it. So I'm at 3.4 stars. I was at 3.5. I got all the way up to 3.5, and then I asked people to rate it on my Twitter, and then a bunch of people give it 1 star because they love me. They love me. So give me some 5-star reviews, friends, or you can give me a 1-star review. It's whatever. But if you like this stuff, check out the Apple Podcasts. give me a 5-star review, especially write a review, and that will help the algorithm. And please ask a question in the comment section if you have anything that you're curious about with respect to all this stuff. And please let me know how you think I'm doing, because the more feedback I get about the way that I'm delivering this and presenting this information, the better I can continue to make the videos, because every video I'm trying to work on it to get a little bit better. And so your input, your feedback will be helpful to that process. So please send it to me. Hope you guys liked it. Have a good one, and check out the next video. Peace.